Hi, this is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to do a little bit of apologetics. It is right up the truther alley, though, because this one is, are there really 777 books of the Bible that are hidden in the Vatican? Coming right up. So this is one of my biggest questions. I probably get this quite a bit. I actually was told by one of my administrators, and very close person to my life. She was like, "You really need to do an FAQ." So I started creating FAQs to answer some of these questions, and it's just one that just keeps coming back up. And I've sort of dealt with this, but I'm going to get it really hard right now because I've been kind of challenged in here with that too. So let's look on Telegram. I'm going to show you what happens here. So you might have to look look at this a little closer. Sorry if you can't see that on the screen, but it says they have hidden 777 books of the Bible of the Vatican. Um, how can the current Bible be complete Word of God? And so it goes on, and we get into a lot of little conversations here. And so there's another one, the natural consequences, some back and forth with this. Okay. Then it kind of goes, and then I give a patented answer that we're going to talk about here. Okay. And I give another level of the answer that we will get into a little bit closer with that too. And then there's this conversation about why is there 66 books versus 777. Okay. So this is where this kind of thing all comes from in overall essence with that too. Now I'm going to kind of bring this back up in the screen here in a sec because you got to kind of pull it off and put it back up. It's just kind of funny how it does it, like let you stay up there. Okay. So where overall are we getting this conversation here? I'll pull this off the screen for a second. Okay. I don't want to beat up this truther, but I know the guy, and he was deleted in Twitter in 2020. Now, there's a bunch of truthers who were deleted in Twitter in 2020, and he was one of them. No, he's a good guy, and he's from a European country. I'm not going to say any more than that. He was the first one that posited this conversation of 777 books. And I remember going back and forth with him on, I don't know if it was out in the middle of open or not, or DMs or whatever. But I'm like, dude, that's just nuts. And I'm like, where'd you get that? He was like, well, military source. And so here's the basic posit of the conversation. There's 777 books that are hidden from us in the Bible. We only have 66. Now, I don't know if it's 66 plus 777 or 777 minus 66. He really didn't talk about that issue, but it doesn't really matter because that was the whole overall idea. Although it would be kind of cool because it'd be 711, and that's when Trump is going to be, sentenced. I mean, it gets crazy when it goes this way. Okay, when we start utilizing numerology to explain some of this stuff that's in the world. Hey, listen, you want to do it? That's okay. But I'm going to kind of hit you with some numerology because that numerology, and I'm not talking about the religion of numerology. I'm talking about how the Jews thought about numbers, and the Bible has the same kind of metaphorical conversation. It's kind of like we use words of metaphors and analogies to explain things. Like, like in basketball, we'll say, throw me the rock. Now, if you said that back in the 70s, and there's a basketball movie that did that, talking about throwing the rock. We never talked about throwing the rock in the 70s and 80s. When I was playing basketball, no one ever talked that way. No one ever said that word. Now, you might tell me, oh, you're wrong because I had a guy in 1981 who did that. Maybe, but it was not an accepted conversation. So when you're saying throw the rock, and see, in my day, throw the rock doesn't fit with a basketball, right? But again, it's a newer analogy for the basketball, right? Instead of just throw me the basketball, right? Throw me the rock, kind of thing. Again, that's an analogy, and it's a accepted metaphor to explain inside of basketball, right? So that's the same kind of thing because it's a cultural conversation when we utilize the numbers that are in here. So I posit this one. This is part of the conversation I had with him, who's definitely not a believer. Okay, he's a New Ager. He's friendly, to a lot of things. He believes in Nasara, believes in a lot of truther kind of stuff. But I kind of said to him, I said this. I said, dude, why 777? Why not 834? Why not 622? Why not 1818? Hut, hut, hut. Sounds like I'm like a football play, right? Um, like, Peyton Manning used to say, Omaha, Omaha. I mean, it was a nonsensical conversation with that too. But that's what I heard when I heard 777. So part of the conversation was like, well, I heard 66 is like the number of Satan. So let's go forward and we'll bring this up because you got to go to the word. And what I find most of these people is they've never spent any time in the word. They've heard a verse that they like and they pull it over with the Nasara conversation or the corruption issue. And they sort of hear it. Well, the wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous. Yeah, I like that one. And so they bring out just portions of it, but it's like picking and choosing. It's actually I'll go into the Bible here in a second, but it's very disingenuous. It would be similar to asking me to speak at an art conference. Or here's another one, having me speak to a bunch of general contractors, or having me speak to auto mechanics. Now, if you want to talk about like philosophy and overall business kind of thing, I might be able to talk to them, but I probably would suck at it because I know nothing about those three particular areas. And we could pick a whole bunch of other ones. Then my wife could come up with about 13 more. And my point is that I'm not an expert in those fields, and I don't even try to anymore. Like my son knows IT, it's like his minor and has this capability. That's cool, right? But I don't have enough ability in it to be able to kind of stay up with conversations in that way. We all have that same thing, right? So when you hear this conversation of 777 books, you go, where did you get the idea? And it's not effective enough just to like put it off. Well, I heard it from a military source, or I heard it. And I go, and here's the thing, because it's such a fun number, like 777 hidden books of the Bible. And we get all like, oh yeah, I'm going to get all over that one. And they've been hiding everything and they've been telling me lies. And the Bible has lies in there as well. And I'm going, are you sure you know what you're talking about? On my YouTube channel here, I've spent 37 years talking about some of these topics and actually studying them. Specifically, I've talked about something called truth and lies in what we believe. And in John 19:31 through 37, in 6 verses, I can prove the Bible has never been rewritten. You want to check it out? Go watch the first video. There's another video on Acts 4:12 that in that one verse, it has all the medical evidence that never existed until the 1600s. Guys, there's stuff in the Bible that you can't imagine. In Ezekiel 38 and 39, it talks about air-to-air missiles. It talks about the concept, of cell phones. Like, what? If the monks who were writing it, if they thought that was stupid to use this train of logic that Ezekiel was talking about, probably about 700 BC, why didn't they just take it out? Why wouldn't they just go, that's kind of stupid. Let's just rewrite it again. And see, that's the craziness that we don't bring our thought process in. We don't game it out, okay? Which is what chess is. Chess is like you make a move. You just think you're making a move. But really good chess people, and listen, I'm not one of them, because my son was beating my butt at 11 years old, right? But really good chess people can game it out. They can see 7 or 8 moves ahead. Now, I see 7 or 8 moves ahead when it comes to apologetics or the Nasara stuff or end time issues. But again, don't ask me to game forward, game it out when it comes to architecture, right? I mean, we're a building project. Now there's some things we want to do a building project in our own building, and I'm going, but I need to have someone do this because I'm stupid when it comes to that. Okay, so I beat that dead horse a little bit. Let's just show you some of the verses where we get this conversation of 777 and 66. Okay, so let's go and bring this up. And so we're in the Olive Tree Study Bible. So let's do this a little bit differently. And we're going to bring it up and I'm going to make it a little easier for you to see. So Revelation 16, excuse me, 13, 16, it says, and he requires everyone, great and rich, small, great, rich, poor, free, slave, to be given the mark on his right hand or on his forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, the beast's name or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. The one who has understanding must calculate the number of the beast, because it is the number of man. His number is 666. Okay. So let's pause for a second and understand who we're talking about. Because when we go backward a little bit, Revelation, see, and I have people say, well, haven't you read Revelation 13, 18? I'm like, yeah, but you got to start with Revelation 13:1, because it is a conversational point. Even though there's a little breakage here, you see my Bible. This is how I mark it up like crazy. I'm marking it up. I've got all kinds of categories right here, and including, I'm going to just show you this. This is just what I do. In my Olive Tree Study Bible, these are how many notes that I put on just eschatology itself. And then each one of these have different areas. Plus, there's other ones like do not understand. They're like verses I'm like, I don't get what that is. And I pray God gives me some kind of insight later on, right? But let's do this together, because because if we're going to talk about 777 and 66, we got to see where it comes from. So the Revelation 13:1 talks about a beast coming out of the sea. He's got 10 horns and he's got 7 heads. The horns are diadems, and there are blasphemous names on there. So this, and we see a beast. This is called the first beast. And so it is and verse 2 tells us the authority that he gets. But when we go to Revelation 6:2, and I'm not going to do this here, but Revelation 6:2 tells us that only Christ, or Jesus, who's on the throne, is capable of opening the first seal. That starts the whole tribulational period. So who introduces it? Jesus. The authority comes from Satan. Okay. But then we have to move this forward, because, by the way, the Antichrist is not just spoken in Revelation 13:1 through 18. He's talked about in Revelation 6:2. He's talked about in I have to do this. 1 Thessalonians 5. He's talked about in 2 Thessalonians 2, 2 through 12. He's talked about in several portions of Romans. He is mentioned in Daniel 9:27. And again, there's several others. Those are just ones of the highlights of those ones. So this is a man. It is not a system. So let's talk through this whole process of 13:1. So we got the beast, right? And he comes out of the sea, which means he comes out of obscurity. So even if we're 5 years away, we're 10 years away from the tribulation happening, even if we're a day away, it doesn't really matter. I don't believe we're a day away, but just the tribulation's in the future. We're not in the tribulation because the Antichrist hasn't been revealed by Jesus. And we have all these other issues that have not occurred. So therefore, we're not in the tribulation, simply put. Now, here's what happens. He's a guy, but he's going to get from obscurity, he's going to get inside of him a satanic or a demonic entity. The next part of this, he gets a fatal wound, and then later on, we get this other dude who shows up, and he gets a beast in him as well. And that dude actually is able to go out and he goes forward and explains something. So we see the second one in verse 11. And we see this second one, he sounds like a lamb, but he it looks like a lamb and sounds like the dragon. Well, that's the second beast. And his point is to create he's the false prophet. And then we have to move him forward before we get the image of the beast. It's an image of the beast throughout the whole world. So everyone has to worship him. So you don't just like accidentally get the little tattoo or the little chip implanted in you and go, I'm good. You have to have the whole experience in here. So you know that there are people in the Mormon church who, there are actually people, and I've met these people, and they have 10% taken out of their paycheck because the Mormon church tells them that company that they have to take it out of every single one of their employees who are even go to the Mormon church. Like, I mean, that doesn't mean that they're actually practicing Mormons, right? So you know that you can imagine if you went to a mosque and there are 200 guys that go to the mosque 5 times a day to pray to Allah, that there is a couple of them in there that don't even really believe it, but they're doing it because of societal pressures. But here's what happens when it says worship. It is, and by the way, yesterday I was in worship. I was in worship for a while before I'm in tears. That means it's like deep inside of me. Worship is a big, big element. It's actually the most important element of this thing. Okay, so those are the backdrops of this whole process. Now we spent 16 minutes talking about that. Let's move forward and have this conversation just a little bit more. Bring it over here. I just want to bring this off the screen and we're going to kind of go back to this. Okay. So here's what also occurs too. We have this problem of 777. Okay, so where do you get 7? 7 means the number of God. Okay, but when you put a tetrarch of 3s, right, this 3, you have a completion. So the completion of God, one type of completion of God is in the Bible. So that's, it fits. You're even making it fit more. Like, stop being histrionic. Just calm down for half a sec. Listen to me through. But another type of completion is actually in the triune nature of God, the Trinity, right? That's 3 into 1. I mean, that's like this completeness. It rounds it out. Oh, that's kind of cool. So it's really those, when we have those verses, I mean, those numbers, that's what they mean. But let's go over to the number of 6. And even in Revelation 13:8, or 13:18, it says it's the number of man. So one man or one woman, it's really about humanity. So we'll just use humanity for a second, just to be PC. And so one man, so that is a reference of a man. 2 actually means unity or peace. So I'm going to do this in sign language because this is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9, right? This is how you do it. But 6 is the number of man, and 2 is the number of unity. So if we put those together and marry those 2 words or those 2 numerology points together, what you're talking about, and if we're talking about a global sense of humanity, that would be peace. When do we get peace? When we're inside of the Word. Oh, that's pretty deep, isn't it? How about another one? If we just talk about on an individual nature, I've been married for 31 years on, and a man and a woman come together in that unity and we create a relationship. This is actually the word for relationship. Okay. And you don't just do this. I mean, if I just said this, it's just a relationship. But if I go like relationship and I circle it around with meaning, that's marriage relationship in essence, right? Now, when we say that kind of stuff, we're saying that from an individual basis, like a man and woman, and they get together and they become married, that is 66. Another one of 66 is unity of the world, like the whole world is done that. And by the way, the Bible starts with a husband and wife, Adam and Eve, getting together, and they're in a most peaceful place in the world, which is the Garden of Eden. And they're always trying to get back, and humanity is trying to get back to a peaceful time frame. Even Hitler was talking about it, and he was wrong, but he was talking about the Reich would be together for 1,000 years. Where does he get that from? Why didn't he say 932 years? Why didn't he say 500 years? It's because he was stealing from the Bible. This is always Satan trying to steal from the Bible, right? And so we have people that talk about it all the time. We're going to have 1,000 years of peace. No, that only happens after the tribulation, 650 verses of the tribulation to get to 333 verses of the millennial reign of that 1,000-year peace. That has to happen after the craziest situations of the world, and we're not there yet, and we've already proven that. Okay, so let's move this one forward a little bit more. So 66 is the number of this unity or peace or marriage. So what's 666 mean? 6, number of man. 3 is the number of completeness. Now, one point of completeness that you could use if you wanted to is that man or woman is complete when they come to Christ. I know that sounds crazy. You're saying 666 could be someone coming to Christ. I'm using this in context. Context. Another one is when they get married. There's a context, the full context from a Hebrew tradition. Or when someone comes to their death. So as they come to death, they are completed. Man or woman is complete. Their time frame is ended. Now, 1 Corinthians 3:13 tells us that we build our foundation in Christ. That only comes from him, right? But you can build on it wood, hay, or stubble, or precious stones, right? Gold or silver. And if it's burned away in the fire, that one at least goes into, in essence, he goes into eternity, but everything is burned up. So he gets the robe of righteousness, but he ain't got anything else. He doesn't go in with a backpack for anything into heaven. No provisions, in essence. Okay, you get my reference there. And that is actually a type of completeness that you could actually use 666 to. But let me tell you one of the more scary pieces of real, where the contextual nature of Revelation 13:16 and Revelation 13:18 actually says. Because we've always known, and Billy Graham had talked about there's no atheist in foxholes. Now, I don't care what you believe about him. That is a true statement. And I've talked to plenty of combat veterans about this same conversation over and over again. Now, in the tribulation, there is a period of time, and when you take the mark of the beast and you would decide to worship Satan, you have sealed your fate for all of eternity. Fait accompli. It is, you've sealed it, it's done, it's accomplished. Your fate is done. What happens inside of that situation, there are two main points, and there are other, but we'll just bring up two main points that can happen to a person that is complete on the earth. Now, when someone dies and he has chosen against Christ, he's in hell. Hell is a waiting area, right? It is not the final point. There is a final portion that comes at the white throne judgment after the tribulation, after the millennial reign of Christ, when the dead, the wicked dead, line up in front of Christ, and he has the book of life, and there's another book too, the book of Lamb, book of life. But he reads in here and he goes, your name is not written in the book of life. He basically says, you're dead. And the guy looks down at himself going, Oh, yeah, you're right. Here's where God takes the triune nature of the man, the body, the soul, and the spirit, marries them back together, resurrects him in his fallen form, and then sends that person based upon what the word says and what he has chosen. He didn't send him there. He told them, this is what you did. And the sentence is lake of fire. Okay. Now, that happens in the normality of the world. If you lived in 1620 and you die in 1690, a 70-year period of time, right? And you never accepted the Lord and you knew what you didn't want to accept and you didn't want to do it, and you were 1690 and you died, you go to hell because you have been completed, in essence, 666. And so you have to wait until the eternity comes, or specifically the white throne judgment, because you're in hell, and then you have to go to the white throne judgment, in which you go into the lake of fire, which is even worse. Okay, that's what normally happens. But the tribulation adds an element that is so fascinating, it's scary. In the tribulation, people that get the 666 here, right? What they and they worship, what they actually have is two basic points. Number one is the fifth trumpet. When these murder hornets come and they sting people and they want to die, but they can't die for 5 months. And as I teach on my tribulation series, those people that can't die for 5 months, guess what? They want to die. And someone who wants to die will actually find a way to kill herself or himself. You'd have basic zombies walking the planet in essence in that point. The second point that actually happens is in the bowl judgments that would happen a little bit later, near the end of the tribulation. And it says they have these grievous sores that hurt so bad. And it's so bad of a pain. And then it talks about and goes forward in those conversations. It's because here's the interesting part. You know, in hell, you have demons around you because they're, in essence, the jailer. This is what Jesus tells us. They're the jailer of the damned in hell, in essence. But if you have people who've accepted the mark of the beast, which that's why we're not in the tribulation, because we haven't had an acceptance of a mark of the beast, and those people would be damned in hell. Are ready, but they're alive and they're still damned. Oh my gosh. They made a conscious choice to accept it, and they loved their conscious choice, and they hated God. They hate him with an absolute, utter, unbelievable nature. As strongly as I love the Lord, they hate him. Okay? So what happens is that you have to have jailers when you have something not just in hell, but when you actually have it in the tribulation. We have demons that will infect much of humanity during the tribulation. Oh my gosh. So here's what I want you to understand. I have taken time to prove the Bible over and over again. I can prove the Bible has not been rewritten. And yet we have people that say to you, there's 777 books and they're in the Bible, right? And they've been hidden away, which means this. Now let's game this puppy forward just a hair. If we game that conversation through, that means for 2000, we're in 2024, right? For 2000-ish years or more, or longer than that actually, but we'll just use 2000 years for a conversation here. For 2,000 years, the Vatican Church has covered up these 777 books that you can't read, but I can read them. There are books that were not in the Nicene Creed in 300 AD. Oh, really? That messes me up. Like the Book of Thomas, the Book of Mary. There's a whole bunch of these books that were shown to be fraudulent books. No, you might not agree with that. That's okay with me. You want to read those books? Go for it. They're out there. We've been talking about them. I've actually talked about them for years and years and years. And only since 2020 have a whole bunch of truthers brought this stupid stuff up. And I'm going, you don't even know what you're talking about. Again, you're like me talking to car mechanics. I don't know anything about car mechanics. Why am I talking about this? These people don't know anything about the word. And I go, where did you get that? See, what they were saying is that for 2,000 years, no one in humanity could ever be accepted and they could never go into heaven. Oh, I'm not trying to say that. Yes, you did. Because only in, let's say it's 2024 when it's fully revealed. In 2024, we finally get revealed from the Vatican. We get to see all those 777 books and we get to see what God really said. You think? Come on. Step back from the silliness, okay? I got these lights that are orange and green trying to like light up correctly. But if you walked around with a green light on you all the time, you're like, can you get away from the green light just a little bit? That's what I'm saying. We don't even know what kind of light we're in because we haven't researched it. And those same people, they want to talk about, well, I want to see all those other books of the Bible. They're not books of the Bible. There are other books. There's a whole bunch of other books. There's the books of Josephus that aren't biblical, but they talk about Jesus. They actually intimate him in different ways. Great. You want to read the Book of Mormon? Go for it. You have every right to read whatever book you want to because our God has got gives you free will. But I ask you in the same way, how come you don't want to read John? Why don't you want to read Luke? How about Ezekiel? How about Revelation? How about Romans? Why? Because that would lead me to Christ, and I don't want to do that because I like where I am right now. Because I don't like to trust anything. Well, go ahead. You have every right to believe that. But you don't get to make stuff up and ask for an apologist to actually go along with you because you make no sense. Because you would be damning billions of people to hell, and only these 8 billion people who are here now will only have this revelation. That is a disgusting level God that you think you're saying. And you go, but that's not how I believe. That's what you say when you believe in 777 books. The Holy Spirit took 40 authors and he wrote 66 books. Those 66 books, by the way, what I just told you, are unity with man. Peace, or in essence, marriage with man. Why do you think Jesus calls you the bride of Christ in Ephesians 5? Because that's how he sees you. That's why there's 66 books. And it isn't because of the silliness that you think you've heard. Now, I'm gotten hot and bothered. I'm even sweaty right now because I get that way with that too. But this is the way I want you to think. I want you to sit back and think about this. Now, here's what I would say. You probably need to rewatch this if you really didn't catch all this. You need to go backward and forward and think about this. This would actually be a good Bible study for your group to talk about. Pause it in the middle of it. Go, well, what do we say? How do we look at that? What is he talking about? How would we say that? What have I believed? What have I not believed? Why don't I want to believe in the God of the Bible? Is he inconvenient for me? Do you have something against him? You might. I hope that helps you. Thanks so much.